Well, greetings, everybody. I'm talking to you myself today from Cornwall. I'm down in Cornwall doing some research on a completely unrelated subject, but it's very interesting. I'm in what was tin mining country in North Cornwall. And all the shafts, now the tin mining industry is gone, but all the shafts are still there, the chimneys are still there. It's very interesting. It's very interesting to look at. And of course, the scenery, the coastal scenery is beautiful. And I am very fortunate yet again to get Claudio Grass, my old mate, my libertarian mate, who we like to chew the fat by and by. And he's very kindly come on to help us discuss a few things and ponder a few things. As everybody knows, I've been a gold bug, if you will, now for a very long time. And I've been saying in my books and my podcasts and everything I do is buy gold, do yourself a favor, get out of paper currency. Pretty straightforward stuff, not very complicated. And of course, I've been now proved right beyond any doubt. I mean, there's no doubt that that we gold bugs have been right. But there's some other aspects which I think you might find interesting, and that's why I want to listen to Claudio's view. Is so you want to buy some gold, and I'm really talking to perhaps the bigger end of the market, not so much the little tube of sovereigns hidden in the tea caddy in England in your kitchen. Nothing wrong with that. And we're all, we're not all multimillionaires. We can't all afford as much, perhaps, gold as we want. But this is directed a little bit more, this little conversation, to those people perhaps that have a more significant sum than average. And they want to know, well, what am I going to do with it? Where can I put it not to get it stolen by what is now, I would argue, by definition, in Britain, a communist government. They are out to steal, either by taxes or all sorts of ways that they can steal your money, steal your wealth, and steal your family's inheritance. And we've seen that with farmers. So what do? You think, well, okay, gold's a good idea. What am I going to do? Where am I going to buy it? How am I going to buy it? Where am I going to put it? And all these kind of things. And so Claudio out there in Switzerland knows all about these matters. And I've known him for quite a while, and he's a very sound fellow and very well worth listening to what he's got to say. So, Claudio, welcome, and thank you again for coming on.
Godfrey, thank you very much for the invitation.
So let's just kick it around. Just let's say, not necessarily from a British point of view, but with a nuance to the British. What should they do? Because they're under the most threat, really, at the moment with this current government. So somebody wants to buy gold or silver, maybe. I don't know. Let's leave it there. What? It's all very well. What do they do? How do they handle it? Where would they put it? How strong are the Swiss these days on protecting the integrity of Swiss deposit box or Swiss banking, so on and so forth? So Claudio, the floor is yours, and I'll just butt in every now and again if I don't understand something. I want to develop something, but you carry on. Tell me what you think. Let's just say I've sold my business in Britain, something like that. I've got a reasonably good price for it, maybe $1 million or $2 million, what is it? That kind of level. Not monster, but important to a family. A few £1 million. But I'm very uncomfortable about keeping it in Britain for these reasons. What would you suggest here? How do we handle this?
Okay. Well, I mean, I think it's obvious that the whole world is becoming more totalitarian. We can see that, in the US, we can see it also in the Eurozone. Even Switzerland has changed. I mean, it's not that the people in Switzerland have changed that much. It's more, that the politicians, basically, they do whatever they want to do. However, I think, still when it comes to private property rights, especially kept outside the banking system, I think that's still something where Switzerland is pretty hard and also a pretty safe place. I think when it comes to the banking system, I think their private property rights are only of temporary nature. We have seen that with Credit Suisse, that it was possible that the government interfered, martial law, emergency law, and basically, their message was, if you don't bail out Credit Suisse, then the whole system goes down. So they have always, I think that's a dialectic on the system side, and I think all the risks that we are facing today are within the banking system. I think, there we're going to see capital exchange control. There we're going to see confiscation. We might see, banking struggles and so on. So, and especially in these days, where we can see that also the banks have become, the police of governments. So, so therefore, I believe private property rights in the banking system, that's a big question mark. But if you keep, something physical, which cannot, which is there, which is tangible, you can take it in your hand. And if you store it also outside the banking system with private companies, I think that's the best you can do. Because also the partners that I'm working with, for example, they are not considered foreign financial institutions. So it even gives you also more privacy. And there also, when it comes, if you're looking for a precious metal dealer, I mean, it's really important to check the terms and conditions, And but if you go for an international solution, for example, over here in Switzerland, or the partners that I have, I mean, there the private property rights are clearly defined, because whatever they do, it's basically always under the direct possession of the customer. My partners are not allowed to lean out or to play around or to do something with the metals. They basically really just, they buy on behalf of the customer, and then they store it in the format of the choice. And as I said, on the Swiss law, and I still believe this is the best we can get for the time being. I mean, I really don't know where to go else. I wouldn't store metals in the United States. I wouldn't store them in the UK. I wouldn't store them in the Eurozone. I mean, there we already have seen, in the past that politicians, they have a lot of power, or much more power in those areas. So they can come up with confiscation orders and so on. And here in Switzerland, it's still a bit more complicated, because we have the direct democracy, we have 7 presidents and not only one. So the division of power is still in existence. And let's assume if some politicians here in Switzerland would come up with the idea that they could confiscate precious metals, for example, they would really have to bring it in front of the people, because that's private property rights. That's part of our constitution. It's not easy to do that. Basically, they really will have to, because it would also trigger a change in the constitution. So they would have to bring it in front of the people, which basically always gives us at least 6 to 12 months to act. So the political mechanism in Switzerland is much slower than when it comes to other countries, which I believe is a good thing today. And at the same time, I mean, I'm working with partners. So everything is based out in Switzerland. Everything is under Swiss law. But at the same time, we also maintain international structures, meaning because we don't know where the world is going to. I think the trend is clear. I mean, this system is going down. I think there will be a new system in the future. But what we are awaiting over the coming, months or years is really, an impoverishment of the people, and that governments will become much more authoritarian. And we also don't know how all these wars will play out. Ukraine, the Middle East, are we going to face new migrant crises? I have heard, we have seen that they want to forbid AfD, for example, in Germany. So, I mean, it just shows, everything is, if they do that, I mean, then they basically say 12 million Germans are right-wing extremists and so on. So this will be a trigger for the police state in the Eurozone. And I cannot see that kind of development over here in Switzerland. I think that the people are still more sound. We still have it in our genes that, government is not so important. I'm sorry, there was sorry. Okay, now I lost a bit. But I think, we need, because I think Europe is in the middle. I mean, Germany is going down the drain. When the Germans are falling, I mean, then the whole Eurozone is basically falling. I mean, we are in the middle when it comes to geopolitics. It's really the East and the West again. And we in Europe are in the middle. So we don't know how the whole situation will develop. And therefore, I think it's important to have clear structures set it up so that even, let's say, war is coming, or, Switzerland is changing, that we already have processes in place that we could move at such a point, metals to another continent, into another private storage facility. So that's all stuff which we have done and which we have prepared for the worst case. But I think, we can only try to think ahead. We never have 100%, but I think that's the best you can get these days when it comes to structures and private property rights.
So if somebody comes along to you from Britain, for example, and says, I have I want to buy £1 million worth of gold, how does the audit trail of that work? Let's say, or somebody has already £1 million worth of gold, for example, and then they wanted to put it in safe custody or something of this nature. Keep out of the banks, because the banks, all banks, are vulnerable to governments.
Yeah.
Private deposit houses, the same in Britain, actually are not so. I mean, if nobody knows you've got the gold in a private deposit box, there is no way that anybody can tell it's gold. But there's an audit trail, of course, in Britain. Where did you buy the gold? I bought it last year. Very easy to find. Year before, reasonably easy to find. The year before that, not that difficult. But of course, the further back you go in time, the more hazy the audit trail is. And also for the cost basis, let's just say, I'm just trying this out for a little bit. Of course, the cheapest way to do it would go to find a bullion house in London, which is the cheapest possible that you could do, and dig it into the garden when it arrives. That's the cheap way of doing it. You can do that.
Yeah.
But of course, if there's an audit trail and they know you've got gold, that audit trail, they'll say, look, okay, it's in the garden. You've dug it in the garden. There we are. We know you've got it, and we're going to pretend you're Julian Assange, and we're going to lock you into Belmarsh in solitary confinement until you tell us where all that gold is. So it's not difficult to do. Incidentally, people, anybody on my channel or your channel on this one, the same with Bitcoin. Don't think Bitcoin's any different, because if they've got an audit trail that they can find, you can get banged up until you tell them where it is. So these are the sort of problems that we've got. So I would suggest that if they're coming direct to Switzerland, the audit trail is slightly less obvious and slightly less easy to find. That would carry a premium. Obviously, it's not the cheapest way of doing it, but then people aren't always looking for a cheap option. They're looking for the most sound option. And that's something I've noticed coming back hot and strong in England. People are saying, I don't want the cheapest rate. I don't want the cheapest thing. I want to know how I can deal with this without the government stealing it. And that's really very important to me, rather than just sort of doing everything based on price alone. What would be a ballpark figure, do you think, if, let's say, I wanted to buy another £1 million worth of gold, or £1 million worth of gold, and I came out there, for example, I came out to Switzerland, and I've got the people follow me who are these kind of people. I've got some big shots that follow me. They come and say, I can fly out there, buy it, stack it in Switzerland, and fly home again. What is the procedure of that, and how does that help? And yes, it's more expensive. It must be more expensive by the nature of that kind of trade. But tell us a little bit about the practicalities of that.
I mean, you always have two different possibilities. I mean, first of all, I think, the customers that we have are always, entrepreneurs, people who earned their money. Their motivation to go into gold is not because they want to hide taxes or whatever. It's really, because they understand the world we are in, and they also understand that gold is money. They also understand that gold is their insurance, their pension. And as you mentioned at the beginning of the audit, if a government comes up with gold confiscation, then of course, in the past we have seen that it has always been local. So the gold has been confiscated in the United States, in Germany, in Italy, Russia, and so on. So I think it's a wise decision, to internationally diversify from a certain threshold. I always believe it makes sense to have 50, 100,000 worth of physical precious metals nearby where you live in smaller denominations, so that you basically can act. And then at the same time, people need to be, awake. I mean, we always see the signs. They're always telling us in advance what they're doing. So if they see that their government is becoming more totalitarian, and they have some gold, and there might be a gold confiscation, I mean, yes, of course, then they have to leave. I mean, if the government is becoming totalitarian, they want to find out, you're not allowed to trade, you're not allowed to hand in gold. We might see, the same atmosphere like during Corona, when basically your neighbor became an agent for the police. So, you never know. So therefore, I think, it's wise to internationally diversify. What we do over here in Switzerland, we always are fully compliant. We need to do a due diligence on the individual who want to invest. We also have to find out how he made the money and so on. And I think, once this is done in a compliant way, I mean, there is possible that you can open up something online. You don't need to fly to Switzerland. Everything can be done also while you are in the UK, for example. And we can do, the whole due diligence. And then afterwards, also, it's possible that you could, wire funds, buy gold, based on the format that you have chosen. So it's pretty, it's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. And of course, we have a paper trail, bank account, a bank wire, from the UK coming to Switzerland. I mean, that's of course always an issue, but I think let's assume, we can always move metals. I mean, if you have structures which are open, so that the individual, the customer is, he can basically pick up metals or ask for physical delivery at any time. So I think it's important that you have open structures, that you're free to act. And let's assume we will see, let's assume if a totalitarian government comes along in the UK, total confiscation, just, willfulness, power, abuse. I mean, you always have a problem, you always have a possibility, that we could move metals out of the existing setup and go into another one. And based on that, you will already have, the paper trail basically broken. So it makes it even more harder, or we can move it somewhere else. So I think these are just, the aim is not that we break a law. I mean, the aim is really that we remain in a compliant way, but that we use the flexibility that we have to assure that we can keep our private property. These governments are stealing all the time, and I think they're going to steal even more in the future. So, so I think these are these kind of ideas or thoughts that you have to make. And for British customers, of course, I mean, there is no VAT, there is no capital gain taxes. And when it comes to silver, then you basically, you have, I mean, as long as you buy legal tender in Britain, then you don't have to pay capital gain taxes in the UK, for example. So that's something which I always suggest, British customers, that they also, I mean, don't buy bars and so on, go for legal tender. And
absolutely, and I've been banging this drum for a long time, everybody. So we'll just underline that. And Claudio's told you, and I've told you many times, if it's kind of the realm, they would again have to almost change our constitution to be able to make that tax liable. You can't put a tax on money because it's already there. So yeah, that's always do that. Always think sovereigns and Britannias. Always sovereigns and Britannias. Everybody, certainly watching my channel. And of course, the other interesting thing, Claudio, is that the government always assumes that you've made your money dishonestly. I shouldn't think I've got any subscribers at all who made their money dishonestly. They're perfectly legitimate businessmen and have been all their lives, who sold their business, or they've sold their land, or they've sold their farm, or they've done something like that. So it's all, so there's no question of me wanting to get outside that trail. But of course, the real problem, of course, of theft is government theft. Yeah. The people who've got the gold haven't stolen the gold. They've built a business, they've got the gold, and they're trying to stop the real thieves, which are governments who are thieves. So, that's good, and we understand that. And I'd like to just bring you on to, I'd like your views on something else now, switching, if I may.
Okay.
I think it was 15-20 years ago when I spoke to a gold expert. I was beginning to come into being a gold bug about 20 or 25 years ago. I was coming out of the chrysalis. And so I thought to myself, I spoke to an expert. He was an expert, an intelligent man. He wasn't just the normal gold dealer. He was a bit of a geese, a bit of a spitho. No, he was a very, very intelligent man, and he knew what he was doing. And I said, how long can this paper gold chase go on? How long can the value of gold be faked? How much longer? Because surely, I said, it's got to break sooner or later. This must stop sooner or later because it's fake, i.e., as my book said, then, and my book now has been updated, but it's 15 years old now, my book, but it does say something along the lines of, for every one piece of real gold, there's about 500 pieces of paper, and nothing much is challenged. Now, it looks like at long last, that's beginning to break down, because this great lie of paper gold and paper trading of gold looks like it's breaking down because people are standing for delivery. A lot of people are standing for delivery. They don't want pieces of paper. And we know that the central banks are stacking gold. They've been buying gold. And we also know that some of the big investment banks have been doing that, like JP Morgan. Now, what is interesting is it breaking down? Am I right in seeing this breaking down? Because the gold, we just saw London taking 8 weeks to deliver gold, not for the first time, and the Fed not being able to deliver German gold for years. So we know the gold, I don't believe the gold is there. It's been leased, it's disappeared, so on and so forth. But your take on that, tell me all about what you think is going on internationally about gold and so on and so forth.
Okay, now we have the situation with the COMEX. Lots of deliveries going to the States. One of the reasons we hear is that because of Trump taxes and so on, and then other people are saying, no, he never spoke about precious metals. It's on other goods, but not on metals itself. Yeah, I mean, I think, I want to say that. I mean, to me, I think the financial system is not coming down because there will be a problem to deliver, that the COMEX is going to fail, that this will be a cause for the end of this system. Because even when we look at the last 2-3 years, I mean, it's not because of the West that the gold price has risen. Because the West really, I mean, the middle class has been impoverished. There is no middle class any longer. And when we look at family office institutional investors in the West, I mean, they are Bitcoin, Nvidia, and so on, but they hardly hold physical gold. So, I mean, the whole gold price increase basically is because of central banks, because of the rest of the world. And so I think this situation that we are facing right now in the States with the deliveries, I think, people will just go for higher premiums, and then they get, instead of physical, they will be paid out in cash. That's what they have done all the time. So for me, I just see it, we had that during Corona, the same situation. Now it's also popping up again, maybe because of Trump and overreaction and so on. So we'll see. But I don't believe that this is going to lead to the crash that we are all waiting for. I think they are going to solve it somehow again. But nothing, it will not be the trigger. What I find much more interesting, and something which hasn't been well stated in the mainstream media and so on, is basically that gold has overtaken the euro as the second biggest currency reserve worldwide. In the past we had the biggest currency, so-called, would be the US dollar. Number 2 has been the euro. Number 3 has been gold, and now basically gold is bigger than the euro. And I think that's a sign which is important, because at the end of the day, it's gold or the dollar. I mean, that's the system we are in. And if I have to decide, do I want to hold, dollars or physical gold? For me, I mean, the answer is clear, especially when we see, what's going on in the financial system. And there will be more printing in the future. There will be interest rates lower. They try to keep the system alive. They are going to debase currencies, fiat money. The world is dividing again. I mean, it's not like in the 90s where everything came together. The US is basically hurting themselves with all these tariffs and these crazy ideas, some of them, from Trump and so on. So we'll see.
Do you have a view on On the hypothesis that it could be reassess the price, the gold price. Of course, the Americans are outside that kind of a system, but that they don't want it at the moment. But instead, we know that it's in the books. I think, what is it in the books at? $35 an ounce or something, the gold reserve of the United States, isn't it? I think something of that nature.
I mean, if they still have it, of course.
Let's assume that's another rabbit hole. I don't think they have, but there, and you don't probably think they have, but that's not the point. Let's just think if they, not alone gold reserves, if it was recalibrated, obviously you can't get out of the trap, the credit trap that the Americans are in and Western countries are in without cutting government spending. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you do. If you don't cut government spending, all you do is you buy yourself a bit more time. But if you do recalibrate gold in the reserves, you could actually balance your books almost overnight by doing that, with your gold reserve going at, let's say it was at $100,000 an ounce, for example. That would actually lift economies who have a reserve of gold, who are in debt, out of the debt trap. It would not solve it for long, because it's just an excuse to carry on spending. You've got to stop spending. But and given that people, investors, ordinary people outside central banks still aren't buying gold in the main, not really buying gold, certainly in the United States and Britain. The amount of gold in the portfolio, in most people's portfolios or pension portfolios, is tiny. It's under 0.5%. So they could actually recalibrate. They might make gold bugs like you and I quite wealthy, but most people it wouldn't affect, because they don't have any. And they could live with the fact that some people got very rich on it, because their governments would get very rich on it. There are some political problems with that, of course, because it would mean the Chinese would become very rich, the Russians would become very rich. America would then balance its budget, or they could get much closer to that if they cut government spending. What's your view of that hypothesis coming? Do you think that can happen, will happen, it might happen? What's your view?
That's, I mean, of course, big speculation. To me, I mean, I think the problem is, it's the state, and politicians are crooks in general. I mean, you have been an exception. I know the reason why you moved into politics is different. But I think for me, I mean, I really, the way I prepare myself is, I believe that before they will return to gold or whatever, that the system is just going bust. That we're going to see, I mean, right now, I think even 2025, it will be a year of toxification, dividing all these groups, again, left, right, migrants, locals, and so on. So, I mean, I think that's artificial intelligence. I mean, it will be really, because nothing is happening by coincidence in politics, And so to me, I expect just chaos, disorder, like every 8 years we had. It was always all these breakups that we have seen in the past. And if you want to believe, of course, history, they always brought fear and terror. So, and I think that's something which we have to go through. So we're going to I mean, the world economic depression, it's on its way. I mean, you cannot stop it. And at the same time, it's not the scarcity of credit, it's always the scarcity of goods and services, and there we have a problem. So I think, they are promoting a central banking digital coin. The governments, they are this digital ID, the 15-minute cities. I mean, they're telling us the way they want to go. That's why we also have seen this huge spike. I mean, if you look at NVIDIA, 300,000% increase. But mainly since 2020 and 2022, So, but that was really, move the people on the digital side. Then we had, all these government-sponsored hedge funds, and the Green Deal and this public-private ownership, moving a lot of credit into these new economies and so on. And I think that's all a misallocation of capital as well. So I expect the worst. to be honest. I don't believe that we're going to transit from this system into another one and that we are going to return to gold. I think first we're going to see a huge crisis and a lot of pain and a lot of suffering. And then really a period where we don't know what's going to happen, like during the Weimar Republic 100 years ago. You know.
So yes, I wrote an article a little while ago in Going Postal magazine, which of course we both write for by and by. It was part 2 of the New Dark Age. I can't see any way out at the moment because certainly in the West, nobody's talking about curtailing government spending. And it doesn't whether you talk about gold or silver or banking systems, at the end of the day, you cannot have the wealth creating sector smothered by the public sector and the special facilities that they have with index-linked pensions and unsackability. And they grow all the time. Trump's kicking some people out now, quite rightly, but I mean, I suspect that's only the tip of the iceberg. It needs to be a major switch out of the dominating public sector in neo-socialist economies. And that we're not close to that now in Western Europe, although there are some new kids on the block. You mentioned the AFD, yes, but see, Marine Le Pen building that, but she's economically, I do know her personally. I find her very charming, but her financial economic perspective is extremely weak. She's a great French patriot, and then we had Meloni come in Italy, who talked a good game, but really hasn't lived up to it. And we've seen the Freedom Party in England, which is on the up at the moment, but they're always trimming. They're trimming all the time. Oh, well, we can't do that. We can't do that. Yeah, I know that's a real danger, but we can't do that really because so the Uni Party, you know, they all piss in the same pot, frankly. You know, so that's the kind of problem. There's nobody actually coming out phoenix-like from the ashes to say we now have to bite the bullet. But of course, that could come. You know, that could come out of the blue. It could come left field, and then of course, perhaps you could come to. So one form of digital currency that could work, of course, is a digital currency based on gold, which would not be particularly difficult if you could have totally independent audited centres, you know, maybe like Switzerland and Singapore, maybe another one somewhere on the globe. From a technical point of view, I see that working. Do you have a view?
I mean, I truly believe the future is digital. So digital gold is just a question of time. I'm also working on a solution where we basically will be able we store it here in Switzerland, but you know people can buy tokens and then trade it on the internet. I don't want to talk too much. We are right now in this starting phase, but this is but of course, I mean the gold will be stored somewhere, so there is always a jurisdictional risk. Because you have somewhere something physical, and the governments. I mean, you know, to me, politics is always left, and what we are seeing right now, it's the international socialists versus the national socialists. That's so, and at the end of the day, it's socialism, so it's always bad. I'm a Swiss guy, you know, I'm a Swiss anarchist from the mountain area. And I think the Swiss history has always been, you know, we never came up with this French Revolution constitution, you know, that a strange entity called France basically made some promises to their own people to tell them that you are entitled to receive this and that. I mean, the Swiss people, when I look at our first constitution or the Bundesbrief 1291, it was only about, you know, the protection of private property and the individual himself. And so this is still in the genes of the Swiss. And I think also, you know, the crisis that we are going to see in the future, it will be really, it will be a cultural answer. So right now, when I look around in Switzerland, I mean, I've met a lot of Swiss people. They understand that, you know, let me quote Frédéric Bastiat, because I think that's really the key issue that we are witnessing these days. And not only today, I mean, also a few hundred years ago. You know, the state is the great fictitious entity by which everyone seeks to live at the expense of everyone else. And so, I mean, the state as an idea, that we need rulers and so on, I think that's completely wrong. And I think the Swiss have proven that we don't need rulers, but we can decentralize the power and we can organize everything on the lowest level based on the municipalities, and you can, on a municipality level, you can organize, healthcare, whatever. I mean, that's where we have to go. So we have to, instead of, trying to change parties and hope for another centralized party, but it's now more focusing on national stuff and so on. I think we have to take away the power from the centralized government and bring it down to the municipalities and the states, and that's the only solution I see in the future. This is the only way we can protect us, because what comes from a political level, I mean, I think it's just destruction. And
I see it your way, as I so often do. It's funny because I did a podcast this morning, was quoting Frederick Bastiat, actually on another level, talking about his other hypothesis, because I know you're a keen man on Bastiat himself, the unseen effect. So I've just been here in speaking to people in Cornwall, and I was in the big fishing village. We've got quite a big fishing town. There aren't much fishing going on in England at the moment, because we got rid of it all to the European Union. They took it all. We gave it all up. Not very clever, but there we are. We did. And of course, we've just put up employment insurance. So the employers are now having to pay significantly more tax if they employ somebody. Can you think of anything more crazy than this? But this is what we've done. They call it national insurance. It's a tax on employment. And what is interesting, that the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, said, yes, I know, but that's on the employer. It's not going to hurt the employee. This is the sort of intellect you're dealing with. Yeah. And of course, we don't know whether he's just stupid or he's running with the WEF thing. The deal is you break the country before you can replace it with a globalist solution. I think he's both. I think he's dishonest, deceitful, and stupid. But there we are. And most of the country agrees with me. But what was interesting is the engineers who deal with the fishing boats in Newlyn, which is just here on the south coast of Cornwall, very small company, they had 7 marine engineers, fully trained marine engineers. They now can't afford it. It's tipped the balance. So they've let 3 go. So there are 3 people, because of that, have lost their job. And I went into the fish market, and there were 1 or 2 very nice ladies who knew their job. They knew their fish, they knew about stuff, who've had their hours cut by 8 hours a week. Well, let's say it's £10 an hour, roughly speaking. They're losing £80 a week. Well, that's a lot of money for somebody who's gutting fish, on the quayside, who aren't earning very much money anyway. And of course, it's the knock-on, and this is where we come back to Frederick Bastiat. It's the unseen.
Yeah.
Now, and the unseen, of course, because it's not easy in the statistics, how many small companies or medium-sized companies aren't employing people because of this? Now, you can't measure that. You can't really measure that, because there's no form you can find and say, I didn't employ 12 people this year because of that. That don't work like that. The statistics don't work like that. And of course, the other thing is, you'll know, Claudio, you probably will know in this country, and indeed America, to my knowledge, Bastiat isn't taught in schools. It's not even taught in French schools. I lecture at universities by and speak to 3rd-year undergraduates who've never heard of him.
Yeah,
they've never heard of Frederick Bastiat.
No,
they've heard of Keynes
and Marx.
Yeah, and that's about it. Keynes and Marx.
And the history which has been written by the winners.
We've got a whole generation, and I would suggest to you the second generation now, the 40 and 50-year-olds who only know Keynesian economics.
Yeah.
So they don't think there's a solution. They think it has to be the government absorbing everything, the government spending. That's what they truly believe. They don't believe the wealth creating. They don't know what the wealth creating sector is. And I spoke to somebody who was from quite a prestigious think tank, who wouldn't accept that a self-employed hairdresser was part of the wealth creating economy, because she was only a hairdresser.
Okay.
So where he thinks the wealth creating sector would be, you know, the head of personnel at the town hall. You know, because he's very important. He's running a budget of X. Some people who you would think would be on our side as libertarians, you think they still don't get it. But then, of course, they don't understand the definition of the wealth creating sector. Is everybody is in the wealth creating sector who's not in the public sector. Easy, isn't it? It's a one-liner.
Yeah.
You won't find many people understand that.
No. No, I think, you know, it's done. I mean, to me, I think we cannot stop it. There will be no solution. There will be no savior. The only thing we have to do is basically just stay awake, you know, prepare ourselves, reduce the risk in the banking system, take out stuff, try to find, you know, where do you want to go. I mean, even when London, I mean, yeah, when the grocery stores are empty and so on, I mean, and this is going to happen in the future someday. I mean, we don't know exactly when, but I think it's closer than, you know, 10 years ago. That's for sure. So I'm expecting over the next months or years, I mean, it's, you know, we are just going towards chaos and disorder. And in the meantime, I think, you know, yeah, the middle class, if there is still one, you know, will be impoverished. And the people are just going to lose their jobs. I'm expecting a lot of bankruptcies this year, also in Germany, you know, stuff which have been hundreds. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of small and mid-sized companies. And I think this trend, I mean, there is always cause and effect. And I think we are so deep in this bubble. We are so deep because people have been really brainwashed by this government-sponsored education system. They have been taught the wrong things. They don't understand what it means to be, you know, what it means, what private property is for. You know, they don't understand the meaning of freedom of speech. Now everyone is political correct and so on. I mean, it's so I just wait. I mean, I prepare myself. I reduce my risks. I buy some gold and silver, and because I also want to be mobile, because we never know, you know, how the future will turn out. Maybe really have to leave the continent and we have to go somewhere else. We don't know yet. But as long as you have something, you know, in physical formats, at least then you always have some capital to start a new life. And that's what I'm preparing for. And that's also what my customers are preparing for.
Mm-hmm. Well, Claudio, thank you so much for your insights. It's been always interesting. It's slightly depressing to talk to you.
I'm sorry, Godfrey.
I'll just go away and shoot myself. Oh dear, gallows humour. But fortunately, the good news is I'm 75 years old now, and I won't need to shoot myself because I suspect my time left on the planet isn't that long.
Well, I hope you will remain a few years.
My wife, of course, is much younger than me, and she'll have enough gold coins to actually find herself a toy boy as soon as I'm dead. So she's laughing. Anyway, my dear fellow, I do thank you again. Lovely to talk to you. And I look forward to talking to you again later on in the year.
Thank you very much, Godfrey. Always a pleasure.
As most of you know, my work is very heavily independently research-based, and I get my information from all over the world. It would help if you press the subscribe button and the little bell next to it, because the more subscribers I have, the more likely it is that international independent research institutes will share their material with me. It's most helpful, and then of course I automatically share it with you. So surprise, won't cost you anything. Thank you very much.